3 days before the murder of Ayrton Senna. He alerted his team about critical car problems. He begged them to fix the steering, warned them about the brakes, even called his biggest rival for help. But nobody listened. Days after, those ignored warnings became a fatal mistake that would cost him his life. In a few moments, I will show you the real truth of how he was murdered. But before then, you need to understand how everything started. Ayrton Senna wasn't just a Formula One driver. He's considered to be one of the greatest racing drivers in history. He was a 3-time world champion. Senna was known for his exceptional qualifying pace and wet weather driving ability. Beyond his statistical successes, Senna was also a humanitarian who quietly donated millions to help underprivileged children in Brazil. He is considered a national hero in his country, remembered not just for his racing success, but for bringing pride to his nation during challenging economic times. Behind the talented driver the world saw on track was a simply spiritual man, driven by faith and compassion. In the quiet moments before each race, Senna would open his Bible, finding strength in prayer. "God is my refuge," he once said, explaining how his religious convictions gave him the courage to push to the absolute limit. But it was his work away from the circuit that truly revealed his character. Senna secretly donated millions to help underprivileged Brazilian children, a fact that only came to light after his death. He would often visit local communities, spending hours with young fans who saw him as more than just a racing driver. He was their hope for a better future. His approach to racing was almost mystical. "You are doing something that nobody else is able to do," he explained. "The same moment that you are seen as the best, the fastest, and somebody that cannot be touched, you are enormously fragile." This duality defined him. The same man who would push rivals off the track would also stop to help a crashed competitor. His legacy lives on through the Instituto Ayrton Senna, established by his sister Vivian after his death. The foundation has helped millions of Brazilian children access education and opportunities, embodying the same spirit of generosity that Senna showed throughout his life. It's perhaps his greatest victory, one that continues long after his final checkered flag. In 1993, despite his incredible success with McLaren, Senna could see the writing on the wall. The dominant Williams cars, designed by the brilliant Adrian Newey, had become nearly unbeatable with their advanced active suspension system. Alain Prost, Senna's greatest rival, was cruising to the '93 championship in the Williams FW15C. If you can't beat them, join them. After years of watching Williams dominate with their technical superiority, Senna made the decision that seemed inevitable. He would move to Williams for the 1994 season. But the combination of Senna's raw talent and Newey's engineering genius seemed destined to create a new era of dominance.
Who've been kind of a bit of a nemesis, then went from McLaren to and joined us at Red Bull.
Newey had established himself as Formula One's most innovative designer. His Williams cars had won the previous 2 championships, and his understanding of aerodynamics was revolutionary. The partnership between Senna and Newey should have been unstoppable. But as Senna arrived at Williams in 1994, everything changed. The FIA had banned the active suspension and electronic driver aids that had made the Williams cars so dominant. The new FW16 was a fundamentally different machine. And from the first test, Senna knew something wasn't right. The 1993 Formula One season marked the peak of electronic dominance. The Williams FW15C represented this era with its active suspension, traction control, ABS, and launch control systems. However, FIA President Max Mosley had other plans. In a sweeping decision, the FIA banned all electronic driver aids for 1994. forcing teams to fundamentally redesign their cars. No team suffered more than Williams. Their new FW16 was essentially a compromised design, originally built around now-banned technology. The car's aerodynamics, optimized for active suspension, became unpredictable. The rear end was particularly unstable under braking, and high-speed corners brought sudden, dangerous losses of downforce. When Ayrton Senna joined Williams for a reported $20 million, he expected to inherit the dominant car of the previous era. Instead, he found himself wrestling with a fundamentally unstable machine. In the first two races of 1994, he scored 0 points, an unprecedented struggle for the three-time world champion. As teams arrived in Imola, the paddock was already tense. Friday practice brought the first shock when Rubens Barrichello, Senna's protege, suffered a horrific crash at the Variante Bassa chicane. His Jordan launched into the air at 140 miles per hour, leaving him unconscious with a broken nose and arm. Senna rushed to the medical center to be by his side. Saturday brought another devastation. Roland Ratzenberger, running in practice, suffered a front wing failure entering the Villeneuve curve at 190 miles per hour. The wing had been damaged on a previous lap, and when it finally failed, Ratzenberger lost all front downforce. The impact was very fatal. This is Formula One's first death at a race weekend in 12 years. Deeply affected by Ratzenberger's death, Senna spent Saturday evening organizing what would become the Grand Prix Drivers' Association. Professor Sid Watkins, F1's chief medical officer, urged him to retire. "Ayrton, why don't you withdraw? You're the fastest man in the world. Give it up." Senna's response was telling. "Sid, there are certain things over which we have no control. I cannot quit." After 5 laps behind the safety car, racing finally resumed. Senna led into Tamburello, with Schumacher's Benetton close behind. The Williams was pushing hard, trying to build a gap. His lap times were consistent, showing no signs of mechanical issues. At lap 7, as Senna's Williams approached Tamburello corner for the 7th time, something went catastrophically wrong. The car suddenly veered off course at 190 miles per hour. A slight correction, but it was too late. The Williams FW16 slammed into the concrete wall at 145 miles per hour.
Ali na Tamburello, a batida muito forte.
The red flags waved immediately. Professor Sid Watkins, F1's chief medical officer, reached the scene within 2 minutes. In the cockpit lay motorsports' greatest son, the man who had given Brazil hope, who had pushed the limits of what seemed possible in a racing car. The medical helicopter would lift off from Imola at 2:35 p.m., carrying Ayrton Senna to Bologna's Maggiore Hospital. At 6:40 p.m. on May 1st, 1994, Ayrton Senna was pronounced dead. He was 34 years old. In the wake of tragedy came the search for answers. The Italian authorities launched a criminal investigation focusing on the Williams team and specifically the car's modified steering column. Earlier that weekend, at Senna's request, it had been altered to improve his comfort in the cockpit. The investigation found that the steering column failed, but it's still unclear whether it broke before the crash or because of the crash. Williams maintained it was a consequence of the crash, not its cause. Other theories emerged: a puncture, a suspension failure, or simply the car bottoming out on a track that had been unsettled by the earlier safety car period. The legal proceedings would drag on for years. Patrick Head and Adrian Newey of Williams faced manslaughter charges, as Italian law required an investigation into any death on their soil. Both were eventually acquitted in 2007, 13 years after the crash. The court ruled there was no conclusive evidence of technical failure. Brazil came to a complete standstill. 3 million people lined the streets of Sao Paulo as Senna's coffin, draped in the Brazilian flag, made its final journey. The government declared 3 days of national mourning, an honor usually reserved for presidents. This wasn't just the death of a racing driver. It was the loss of a national hero. In a powerful display of Brazil's love for their champion, 8 F1 drivers served as pallbearers, including Alain Prost, his greatest rival. Every shop was closed. Every TV station broadcast the funeral. Even Brazil's 1994 World Cup victory 2 months later was dedicated to him, the team displaying a banner reading, "Senna, we accelerated together. The 4th title is for you." The world of motorsport fell silent, but nowhere was the silence louder than in Brazil. They had lost more than a champion. They had lost their hope. Senna's death became the catalyst for Formula One's biggest safety revolution. Within months, track walls were redesigned, cockpits were raised, and crash testing became more rigorous. The Grand Prix Drivers' Association was reformed, with every driver united in the push for safety. Today's Formula One cars feature the Hans device, impact-absorbing structures, and the halo, innovations born from the lessons of that tragic weekend. Tamburello Corner at Imola was transformed into a chicana, and track safety standards were completely overhauled worldwide. But Senna's legacy extends far beyond safety reforms. He showed us what it meant to push beyond the possible, to race not just with skill, but with soul. In the words of Alain Prost, Ayrton had a special place in Formula One. He was magic. The sport will never see another quite like him. The boy from Brazil who became immortal. In life, he showed us the limits of what was possible. In death, he made sure no other driver would have to pay the ultimate price in pursuit of those limits. So, was the Williams team at fault? While the court ruled there wasn't enough evidence to convict, the lingering questions have left a scar on Formula One that may never fully heal. Senna's memory lives on through safer racing, inspiring young drivers who dream of glory and remaining in the hearts of racing fans who remember his incredible skills. If you enjoy the content, please do well to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. See you on the next one.